You imagine yourself just stepping off the plane into the noisy, bustling space of Atlanta International Airport. The loudspeaker blares lively announcements. Passengers hurry back and forth, eyes scanning the crowd for familiar or unfamiliar faces. But right at that moment, there stands a woman. She looks unlike anyone else there. Claire Washington, 35 years old. A successful marketing specialist is someone you might easily mistake for a tourist or a stylish businesswoman. Her soft silk blue dress hugs her confident figure, her hair neatly braided, each step light but full of determination. She has just returned from a short business trip, eager to go home, reunite with her loved ones, and prepare for the most important day of her life. But at that moment, rather than being welcomed, rather than finding peace, Claire is stopped. Two young police officers with cold eyes and an air of predetermined judgment approach her. They do not ask or explain, only demand to check her papers and luggage forcefully. You can hear the low voice of one of them tinged with contempt and suspicion. "What right do you think you have to walk around freely like this? Dressed like that, who would believe you're innocent?" The atmosphere instantly turns suffocating. Their footsteps echo like sharp knives, and the cold metal handcuffs crush all hope of freedom from Claire tightening around her wrist. You feel the humiliation spreading in every breath in the eyes of those around. But behind the pain, behind the helplessness, burns an unquenchable fire, the fire of resilience and determination. This story is not just a single event. It is the voice of millions who have been judged, stereotyped, and treated unfairly simply because of their skin color, clothing, or outward appearance. Let us step into the story of Claire Washington. To hear her tell it not only with words, but with her resilient heart and unyielding strength. Claire Washington, at 35, is someone you would call a symbol of resilience and success. She is not only a talented marketing specialist working for a prestigious multinational corporation in downtown Atlanta, but also a woman who holds firm belief in herself and love in a world sometimes full of prejudice. Born and raised in a modest working-class family in the Atlanta suburbs, Claire understands the value of relentless effort. She has gradually overcome hardships, social barriers, and racial discrimination to build a career many dream of. But Claire's life is not just about victories at work. Behind those successes lies an inspiring love story with Robert Evans, the Atlanta City Police Chief, a man who has devoted his whole heart to Claire. Robert, 45, is a white man, a widower with two grown children. He is respected not only for his position, but also for his steadfast character and dedication to the community. The relationship between Claire and Robert once surprised many around them. They first met at a charity event for veteran families. The initial impression was shy glances, but gradually a deep understanding formed between them, rising above all racial and social status differences. "Don't you think we'll face many difficulties?" Claire once asked Robert on a long night, as they sat by the window looking out over the city lights. Robert held her hand, looked straight into Claire's eyes, and said, "Difficulties only make us stronger. I believe in us." Their love is not a perfect story. There were times of arguments, misunderstandings, and scrutinizing looks from outsiders. But they chose to walk together, relying on respect and sincerity. Claire often talks about the early days when she had to face discriminatory stares in meetings or whispered gossip about her unusual relationship. She knew that to be recognized rightly, she had to constantly prove her value through excellence at work and steadfastness in life. Like other famous stories such as Michelle and Barack Obama or Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, they too went through many challenges due to cultural and racial differences. But what matters is how they held on to their faith and built a strong home amid storms. Robert and Claire have been engaged for nearly a year. The sparkling diamond ring on Claire's ring finger is not only a symbol of love, but also proof of their victory over all prejudices. They plan to hold their wedding this summer, a day gathering family, friends, and the community, those who have seen and supported their journey. But just during these seemingly peaceful days, the airport incident happened like an unexpected blow to everything Claire and Robert had built. This is not just a story about an arrest. It is a story about how a strong woman faces injustice, how a love overcomes prejudice to stand firm, and how justice can be found even in the darkest moments. When you hear Claire's story, you will feel the complexity and multidimensional nature of life. There will be moments when you have to pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, if it were me, what would I do? And it is precisely those questions, that empathy, that transform the story from just a news report into a profound emotional experience, a reminder of the power of faith and courage. Claire had just finished a short business trip to New York. She stepped out of the security checkpoint at Atlanta Airport with an excited mood, her eyes sparkling with joy. The wedding was approaching. Everything was nearly prepared. She imagined a warm evening beside Robert, the blessings and laughter of family and friends. The airport speaker echoed hurried footsteps buzzed through the corridors. Claire smiled gently, her gaze fixed on the sign arrival area. She was waiting for a hug, a warm greeting. But what happened next was unlike anything she had imagined. Two young officers suddenly stepped in front of her, stopping the steps that had just begun on her journey home. One wore a police uniform, standing rigid, his eyes cold with no trace of sympathy. The other stood beside him, his face stern as if waiting for a signal to act. "Your identification," one of them said in a dry, rude tone. Claire quickly pulled out her wallet and handed over her driver's license, but their eyes couldn't hide their suspicion. "You just came back from New York. What was the purpose of your trip?" the other asked, as if interrogating a suspect. Claire answered calmly, but gradually felt the tension in the air. "Just a short business trip. I just wanted to come home to see my family." Instead of receiving thanks or a gentle smile, she got a suspicious stare. "We need to check your luggage," the officer said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. "Excuse me, but I haven't seen anyone else get checked like this today," Claire gently protested, trying to keep calm in the increasingly tense situation. "Is there a specific reason?" The officer didn't answer directly. "We work based on reasonable suspicion," he said, his eyes never leaving Claire. "Open your suitcase." A sense of helplessness and shame surged inside Claire. She knew the truth lay in her skin color and clothing. This was not a random check, but a deliberate action. The coercive attitude grew more apparent. "If you don't cooperate, things will get harder." The officer's voice turned serious, his cold eyes threatening. Claire bit her lip, her gaze still trying to stay calm, but inside her heart was a rising storm. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to go home." They didn't let her words go. They stepped forward, one grabbed her hand firmly, the other quickly pulled out cold handcuffs. The scene seemed to freeze the entire airport area. The noise before faded away, replaced by fear and outrage. People around stared, their eyes mixed with surprise, pity, and cautious silence. It can be said that the way Claire was handled that day was completely against standard security procedures, which require respect for dignity, fairness, and privacy. In many cases, airport security checks luggage and documents based on clear and transparent procedures without applying personal judgments. However, in Claire's situation, racial discrimination and prejudiced attitudes made her a victim of an unfair check, even an unlawful arrest. This is not an isolated story. Every year across America, thousands face similar treatment simply because they have a different skin color or appear in a way others assume. Claire understands that well. But she cannot allow silence to continue, because more than anyone, she has a voice, and she will not stop fighting for justice to be served, no matter how dark the situation. "This is not how people should be treated," she thought quietly, preparing for the next steps in her fight to reclaim truth and fairness. From the very first moments Claire stepped out of the security area, the difference in treatment was obvious, but not in the way you immediately see. It was in the scrutinizing eyes, the passing glances that could not hide suspicion. You can imagine, in a vast space like Atlanta Airport, among hundreds of rushing passengers, only one person is singled out for a more thorough check, and this is not because of any obvious sign on her. Two young officers, Thomas and Eric, never explicitly said they suspected Claire because of her skin color, but their behavior said it all. They used cold tones and veiled remarks about Claire's clothing and demeanor, as if she were hiding some dark secret inside the soft blue silk dress she wore. "Do you think she might be hiding something in that bag?" Eric asked, staring at Claire's small suitcase, his voice as cold as ice. Thomas muttered, "Look at her like she just stepped out of a bank robbery." Although their words weren't loud, they were clear enough for anyone nearby to hear. And to Claire, it wasn't just an insult. It echoed a long-standing prejudice, deeply embedded in every action and word. The behavior of the two officers is a typical example of racial profiling, applying security and law enforcement measures based on race. This has been a long-standing issue reported at many airports checkpoints and even on streets across America. Studies show that people of color are often subjected to more thorough checks and treatment than white people, even when they exhibit no suspicious behavior. This is not just injustice, but deeply affects the psyche of those targeted. You can imagine the feeling of constant scrutiny, every step watched and judged, every word doubted. Feeling like you are not yourself, but a subject to be monitored, to be suspected without cause. This psychological impact directly affects the individual rights of those discriminated against. They lose not only freedom of movement, but also suffer mental harm, public humiliation, and sometimes the risk of unlawful arrest. In Claire's case, everything happened quietly but sharply like a cut. Without direct words, the actions and attitudes of the two officers sent a clear message. She was not trusted, not welcomed, and most importantly, she was different. This is subtle racial discrimination creeping into the smallest actions, yet causing the deepest wounds. You can imagine Claire's helplessness, trying to explain that she was just a regular passenger, but her words seemed filtered through a foggy glass of prejudice. This is not just the story of one woman, but the story of millions who silently endure discrimination in the most ordinary moments of life. And that is why Claire's story highlights not only the cruelty of racial discrimination, but also serves as a profound call for change. A fair society does not allow anyone to be judged solely by their appearance. A humane society must listen to stories, feel the pain, and stand up against injustice. And Claire, with her strength, chose not to remain silent. As Thomas and Eric's eyes pierced Claire like cold blades, she knew that one small mistake could cause everything to spiral out of control. But in Claire's mind, fear could not overcome her determination to protect her dignity. She took a deep breath, slowed her breathing to maintain calm. Claire's voice was gentle but unmistakably firm. "I have fully cooperated, and I want to speak with your supervisor," she said, her eyes steady, not backing down despite the cold faces before her. Eric frowned, irritation clear on his face. "Do you think you have the right to say that? Our procedures are very clear. If you don't cooperate, things will get harder." Claire smiled lightly, not mockingly, but with the calm she had cultivated through many hardships. "I know my rights," she replied, "and I also know you cannot do whatever you want without accountability." The two officers exchanged glances. Thomas stepped closer, his tone turning sharp. "We're just doing our job. You're not special." Claire stood tall, her voice clear. "I don't need to be special. I just wanted to be treated fairly like everyone else." In that moment, a quiet strength radiated from Claire, a firm belief in justice and her rights. She did not yell or resist, but with determination, she challenged the irrational gaze, the smoldering prejudice in those holding power. The lesson here is not only about the courage to stand up, but also a clear understanding of one's rights when facing law enforcement. In tense situations like this, staying calm and knowing how to clearly and legitimately speak up can make a huge difference. Claire skillfully used this tactic, making the young officers realize that she was not someone easily subdued. This also serves as a lesson for anyone currently facing or who will face racial discrimination within the legal system. Knowing your rights means the right to know the reason for being checked, the right to meet a supervisor, the right not to be abused, and more importantly, never let fear defeat you. "You cannot silence me," Claire thought. Not today. Claire's determined attitude changed the game, but also heightened the tension in the air. The young officers no longer appeared confident, but they had not yet relinquished the power in their hands. What happens next? It's a dramatic confrontation between authority and justice. And Claire, the woman with a strong heart, was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The atmosphere around the airport suddenly shifted as if everything paused to witness this moment. Claire, once calm and steadfast, now stood in the crowd, her hands cuffed by cold metal handcuffs. Thomas and Eric, two young officers with eyes devoid of any sympathy, did not hesitate to act. One firmly held Claire's wrist, the other quickly locked the handcuffs around her other wrist, the metallic click echoing loudly. Claire did not scream, she did not resist, but inside her a surge of anger and pain rose. The feeling of public humiliation, being bound like a criminal in a public place, no one deserves that. People nearby stopped, their eyes confused. Some shy away and others tried not to look, afraid to face the injustice unfolding before them. There were sighs, whispers, and sympathetic glances directed at Claire. A nearby passenger, an elderly woman with silver hair, whispered to her companion, "Unbelievable. A woman like her, treated this way." A young man turned away, trying to hold back tears. The actions of these two officers were not a new story. Every year, many people, especially from minority communities, experience similar moments. Like the famous Rodney King case in Los Angeles, where a black man was brutally beaten by police, or the story of Sandra Bland, a woman arrested under questionable circumstances who later died in jail. These stories are not isolated events, but manifestations of a system of abuse of power, irresponsibility, and subtle racial discrimination. Claire, standing there with cuffs on her wrists, was not just a victim of racial discrimination, but a symbol for the silent voices of the oppressed. Amid the crowd's silence, Claire felt every beat of her heart, painful, angry, yet still full of determination. She knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of a fight to reclaim justice, fairness, and human rights. Remember, justice does not always come quickly, but it will come to those who refuse to be broken and dare to stand up. The heavy atmosphere in the airport was suddenly broken by Claire's gentle but powerful voice. She stood tall, her eyes fixed on the two young officers holding her. "You know," she began, her voice trembling slightly, but quickly growing firm, "I am Robert Evans's fiancé." The words dropped like a slow bomb, halting all movement around. Officers Thomas and Eric immediately stopped, their eyes changing visibly from confident and disdainful to startled and worried. Thomas, who had previously looked threatening, now lowered his head, his face pale. "Who is he?" His voice no longer held arrogance. Eric looked at Thomas, his eyes confused and unsure how to respond. They understood that the name Robert Evans carried a power they could not ignore. Then the steady footsteps of Robert echoed on the terminal floor. The Atlanta police chief appeared, his face, stern eyes sharp, but still showing deep concern for Claire. People around gradually stepped back, making way for the police chief to approach the scene. His presence brought a new energy, a blend of authority and fairness. Robert stopped right in front of the two officers. His voice didn't need to be loud, but was clear and firm. "Remove the handcuffs from her immediately." Thomas and Eric fumbled, their hands trembling as they searched for the handcuff keys. Their eyes avoided the determined gaze of Robert and Claire. This moment was not only a physical release for Claire, but also a symbol of the power of truth, of relationships, and of justice. In the legal and enforcement system, power is not only about position or authority, but also about the ability to protect and respect citizens' rights, something Robert demonstrated clearly and strongly at this moment. Claire, being the fiancée of the police chief, should not be the only reason she is treated fairly. But in reality, power and connections still deeply influence how situations are handled. We must acknowledge that in many cases, truth and justice are affected by power relationships, posing significant challenges for the legal system to ensure fairness for everyone. Robert did not just protect Claire as a lover, but also as a leader responsible for his job and community. He would not allow anyone to abuse power to harm citizens, especially the woman he loved. This is a profound lesson about the strength of truth, the power of identity, and responsible authority. It is also a warning that justice must be enforced based on principles of fairness, without discrimination or favoritism. Claire did not just stand up for herself, but for all those who have been oppressed by injustice and prejudice. And the power of the name Robert Evans today opened the door to a new chapter of the story, a chapter of transparency and justice. Robert Evans stood tall, broad-shouldered, his sharp eyes full of determination. No shouting, no need for physical force, just his calm and authoritative voice commanding, "Remove the handcuffs from her immediately." The metallic sound echoed as the handcuffs unlocked, freeing Claire's hands from the unjust restraints. The tension around them was so intense one could hear Robert's steady breathing like an invisible shield protecting Claire from all oppression. The Atlanta police chief was not just the head of a force, he was a symbol of fairness, duty, and the power that comes with ethics. In every action and word, Robert showed uncompromising leadership against abuse of power and discrimination. He did not only intervene for the woman he loved, but set a standard for the entire police department. Robert's timely appearance and strict attitude ended Thomas and Eric's abuse of power in that moment, but the story did not stop there. Because in many other situations, leaders are not always ready to stand up or able to intervene in time to protect justice. Those are the times when power is abused and innocent people suffer in silence. Robert knew this well. That's why he was determined not to let this incident fade away as a forgotten story. He committed to overseeing the internal investigation transparently and seriously, ensuring that the truth is revealed and those responsible face appropriate consequences. The power of a leader is not only in the position or strength he holds, but in the courage to defend fairness even when it means facing internal pressure. History has witnessed many times leaders intervening timely to save justice, from the Watergate investigations to modern U.S. police anti-discrimination campaigns. Robert Evans today, through his decisions and actions, became part of that tradition, a symbol of fairness and hope. Claire, freed from both physical chains and invisible prejudice, looked at Robert with deep gratitude. In her heart was not only love, but a firm belief that justice will prevail. Robert's intervention was a turning point not only for Claire's story, but for a broader message about power and responsibility in society. We all need people like Robert, those who stand up for truth, for justice, and for all who are oppressed and disadvantaged. After being freed from the metal handcuffs, Claire and Robert did not go home immediately. They knew the story was not over. Claire's heart was still pounding, but this time with more determination than ever. "We have to clarify this," Claire said firmly. "Not just for me, but for everyone who could be the next victim." Robert nodded, his eyes serious but full of support. "I will stand by you and go all the way with you." Together they entered the police station, where just hours before Claire had endured pain and injustice. But now she carried a mission to demand truth and justice. They met Detective Jessica Lee, a middle-aged woman with a serious face but warm eyes, known within the force for fairness and dedication to her work. Claire recounted every detail, from being stopped, the officers' attitudes, to the insulting words and unlawful arrest. Every word was carefully recorded, leaving no detail too small. Robert stood beside her, listening occasionally, holding Claire's hand to lend strength. Filing an internal complaint was not just a formality, it was a critical first step in the journey to reclaim rights and hold law enforcement accountable. The process required absolute accuracy and documentation to ensure investigations were transparent and fair. These records would become evidence in disciplinary hearings or even legal trials. In many cases, the difference between justice served and cover-ups lies in the precise recording and reporting by victims and witnesses. Claire understood this well, so she did not miss a single detail, whether it was Thomas's annoyed glance when she asked about her rights, or how Eric casually searched her luggage without clear cause. Detective Jessica took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. She assured Claire the investigation would proceed immediately, and anyone violating laws or regulations would be held accountable. In those moments, Claire felt support from within the system, a small but hopeful light in the darkness of injustice. Deciding to speak up was not easy. It required courage, especially when those accused held power within the institution. But Claire knew that without such courage, justice would never come, and others would continue to suffer silently. Robert and Claire left the police station, hearts full of hope, and prepared for the challenges ahead. Because the fight for justice was not just Claire's alone, but belonged to all who believe in truth and human rights. Detective Jessica Lee entered the meeting room with a serious demeanor and sharp eyes, a woman who had dedicated her life to pursuing justice and truth. With over 20 years of experience in law enforcement, she was known as a symbol of fairness and decisiveness in investigations. Upon receiving the report on Claire Washington's case, she immediately formed a specialized investigation team committed to leaving no shadow in the matter overlooked. "We are not only investigating individual behavior," Jessica told the team, "but also looking at the system that allowed this to happen. The truth must be fully uncovered." First, the team gathered all available evidence, surveillance video from airport cameras, capturing every step, every glance, every gesture of those involved. Jessica and her colleagues reviewed the footage repeatedly, paying close attention to the smallest details. The young officers, Thomas and Eric's lack of professionalism and dismissive attitude, were clearly visible traits that the cameras could not hide. Additionally, the team interviewed witnesses present at the airport. Their accounts, though varied in expression, unanimously confirmed the improper conduct of the two officers. "She was treated unfairly," one passenger said, voice trembling but sincere. "I saw a clear difference in how they interacted with her compared to others." Jessica understood that in many cases, technology and witnesses are two crucial elements that complement and reinforce each other to reveal the truth. Recording technology preserves the scene objectively, free from bias or distorted memories. Meanwhile, witnesses provide real perspectives and feelings, bringing the event to life. Jessica emphasized to her team, "We must work meticulously, leaving no detail overlooked, because this is not just a simple case, but a lesson for the entire police force about responsibility and ethics." In the following days, the investigation proceeded with absolute seriousness and transparency. Every piece of data and testimony was carefully verified. Jessica was not only the leader, but also a companion to Claire on her quest for justice, a figure standing in the light, fighting against the darkness of injustice. The investigation room grew so quiet that one could hear the steady breathing of those inside. On the large screen, each frame from the airport's security cameras was projected, magnifying crucial moments of the incident. Jessica and her team watched intently, her eyes fixed on every detail, every gesture, every glance. First was the image of Claire walking out of the security checkpoint, calm and hopeful, without a hint of suspicion. Then the two young officers, Thomas and Eric, approached from behind, with expressionless faces, cold and scrutinizing eyes. Claire's small suitcase was clearly the target of their inspection, and their approach was not a normal security check, but an assessment based on prejudice evident in their suspicious looks and unhidden gestures. In another frame, Thomas looked directly at Claire with a disdainful expression. He said something the camera did not capture, but his hand gestures and eyes conveyed a threat or intimidation. Eric stood nearby, a sly smile on his lips, showing satisfaction and using power to impose on an ordinary citizen. Every frame and every move was recorded authentically and indisputably. The video reflected not only the officer's actions, but also the abuse of power, a power entrusted to protect citizens, but turned into a tool for oppression and degrading human dignity. Jessica glanced at Claire, her eyes full of empathy and determination. "We can use this video to prove the truth and counter any false testimonies." Indeed, visual evidence holds special power in legal cases. It is the light that reveals hidden corners, a crucial tool to protect the innocent and uphold justice. Many cases have been clarified thanks to security cameras, from police misconduct to complex criminal investigations, like the case of George Floyd, whose video of excessive police force awakened the world and prompted change. In Claire's story, the video was undeniable proof, a force to tear down the veil of deception, a bridge for justice to be served. A deeper analysis of these images also highlighted procedural violations, from improper ID checks to disrespectful and overreaching behavior. Thanks to this evidence, investigators have a solid basis to proceed with next steps, ensuring justice will not be delayed or forgotten. In a small room at the Atlanta police station, witnesses were invited one by one to recount what they saw the moment Claire Washington was unjustly detained by the two young officers. An elderly woman with silver hair standing near Claire during the incident spoke with a trembling but convincing voice. "I saw her, a graceful, polite woman. She did nothing wrong, yet she was treated like a criminal." A young man who recorded most of the event on his phone said, "I couldn't stand by watching that. It was a clear abuse of power. I posted the video on social media so everyone would know the truth." Their stories were not just simple accounts, but the voice of justice, the strength of community resistance against injustice. Social reactions spread continuously. People in Atlanta began gathering, sharing the story on social media, and calling for support for Claire. Letters and phone calls flooded the police department, and discussions at community meetings showed a growing collective strength, the power of people refusing to accept discrimination and abuse of authority. Similar to other famous cases, from Trayvon Martin to Breonna Taylor, it was the voices of witnesses in the community that created pressure the legal system could not ignore. The voice of witnesses is the key that opens the door to justice, fighting against the silence that covers up and the conspiracies to hide the truth. In every story of justice, public participation plays a crucial role, not just as observers, but as protectors and advocates for the truth. Claire and Robert understood this clearly. They knew that to win, it would take not only visual evidence and testimony, but also the unity of the community. They believed that when many voices rise together, justice cannot be suppressed. And Claire's story is not just her own, but the voice of millions seeking justice every day across this country. As the images and witness testimonies began to clarify the truth, Thomas and Eric, the two young officers, quickly shifted to a defensive stance, denying all accusations and trying to blame the circumstances. In a closed-door meeting in the investigation room, Thomas Tense said, "I was just following procedure." She was slow to cooperate and showed suspicious signs. Eric added, annoyed, "We never abuse power. If she didn't cooperate, that's her problem." They distorted the events, deliberately blurring the racial bias and rough behavior they displayed. These are common defense tactics in cases involving law enforcement, denying responsibility, blaming the victim, and using legal jargon to distract attention. Thomas and Eric hoped this would lessen their punishment or even avoid serious consequences. But the truth under the light of evidence and witnesses could not be hidden for long. In this situation, the important lesson was Claire's determination and the investigation team's resolve when facing lies and deliberate distortions of the truth. Courage is not only speaking out, but also steadfastly maintaining one's position, refusing to be shaken by distraction tactics. Claire's story reminds us that in any system, truth and justice need to be protected by perseverance and clear-mindedness. And only by confronting lies head-on can we overcome darkness. As the investigation deepened, Thomas and Eric were no longer alone. They had strong backing from their private lawyer and the police union familiar forces within the legal and enforcement system. Their lawyer, Mark Benson, was known for defending police officers' rights. He appeared in a neat suit, cold eyes, and confident demeanor, ready to use every legal means to protect his clients. "We will not allow anyone to be treated unfairly," Benson declared at a meeting with the investigation team. "We will ensure all procedures are followed and the officers' rights are fully protected." The police union, as the organization safeguarding members' interests, quickly got involved. They not only provided legal support, but also pressured leadership to limit disciplinary actions against the two officers. Pressure from the union is nothing new in cases involving police. It's a complex reality where individual rights within the force sometimes conflict with society's need for fairness and transparency. During the internal disciplinary investigation, investigators faced many challenges, from gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, to external pressure aimed at mitigating offenses for the officers involved. Jessica Lee, the lead detective, repeatedly emphasized the importance of standing firm and protecting the truth. "We cannot let the union or lawyers cloud the truth," she said. "Our responsibility is justice and transparency." The influence of unions on the justice system is a major and complex topic. They can serve as a shield protecting those working in high-pressure environments, but can also become barriers to change and fair handling if not properly controlled. Claire's case is a clear example of this conflict, where personal interests and social justice stand on opposing sides. However, thanks to the persistence and transparency of the investigative team, along with growing community support, pressure from involved parties was gradually managed, paving the way for a fairer outcome. Claire and Robert knew that many challenges still lay ahead, but they believed in the power of truth and that justice would prevail. Robert Evans sat in his spacious office, sunlight streaming through the window, casting long beams across his desk. His face was solemn, eyes sharp with responsibility and determination. As Atlanta's police chief, Robert was not only the head of the force, but also bore the heavy responsibility of maintaining the community's trust. Since the incident with Claire, he had continuously overseen the investigation with the utmost rigor and transparency. He understood that fairness is not merely a concept, but the foundation for building trust and respect between police and citizens. "We must ensure that no one feels abandoned or oppressed," Robert said in a meeting with police leadership. "But at the same time, officers must not be falsely accused or subjected to undue pressure." It was a difficult balance between protecting the force and maintaining the department's reputation, between strictness and tolerance. Robert always emphasized that leadership's responsibility is not only to issue orders or impose rules, but to listen, understand deeply, and act for the common good. He personally met with every member of the investigative team, encouraging them to stay strong and work wholeheartedly to ensure justice was properly served. At a press conference, he told the media, "We do not tolerate any misconduct within the force. Transparency and fairness are the core values we strive for." Robert's example demonstrated the crucial role of leadership in crisis management, not just as a titular head, but as a guide, an inspiration, and a guarantor that the system operates on the right course. In tense situations like Claire's case, timely intervention and strong commitment from leaders not only saved the situation, but also rebuilt trust that had been damaged. Robert and Claire each with their role, but sharing one goal to restore justice and truth to their rightful place. After tumultuous days when all eyes were on her, Claire Washington was not just a woman facing justice, but a symbol of resilient spiritual strength. No one knew that inside her was a soul weathered by countless trials, silent tears shed in long, lonely nights. Yet from those depths, Claire learned to stand firm and stronger than ever. Throughout the investigation, each time she was called to testify, facing sharp questions and suspicion from the other side, Claire felt immense pressure. There were moments she nearly broke when rumors and scrutinizing eyes became unbearable. But she knew that if she gave up, others would continue to suffer this injustice. Claire often cited Maya Angelou, a poet and civil rights activist, who said, "We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated." That became a guiding light within her, leading her through the darkest days. Beyond Claire, history records many famous figures who overcame similarly harsh trials. From Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years of imprisonment, yet held on to faith and forgiveness to lead South Africa out of apartheid, to Malala Yousafzai, the brave young girl who stood up for girls' right to education despite being shot and facing numerous threats. Claire's story joins the stream of these remarkable people, those who not only triumphed over adversity, but inspired the world with extraordinary spiritual strength. Claire's resilience was not just endurance, but a proactive stand speaking truth and demanding justice for herself and the community. The lesson here is that in any circumstance, true power lies not in material authority, but in an indomitable spirit and will. In every step Claire took, we see the courage not only to survive, but to overcome injustice. The day of the final hearing arrived, and the atmosphere in the modest but solemn courtroom felt as if it carried the weight of the entire city of Atlanta. The seats were filled with journalists, community members, Claire's family, and those concerned about the case. All eyes were fixed on the table where officers Thomas and Eric sat facing serious charges in the judgment of justice. Robert and Claire sat together hand in hand, their eyes shining with determination and hope. Testimonies, camera footage, and witness accounts had clarified the entire story. The judge, with a warm yet serious voice, declared, "After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, the court orders immediate dismissal of officers Thomas and Eric for abuse of power, racial discrimination, and damaging the dignity of a citizen." A collective sigh of relief echoed through the room. Some wiped away tears, others nodded in agreement. Outside the courtroom, news quickly spread through the media. The press praised the court's decision, lauded Claire's resilience, and recognized Robert's decisive role. At community meetings, people expressed consensus and encouraged transparency within the police force. The dismissal of the two officers was more than a verdict. It was a strong message to society: racial discrimination and abuse of power will not be tolerated. It marked an important step in restoring trust in the legal system and reminded everyone that justice must be continually protected and enforced. It also sparked hope that similar cases would be handled more strictly in the future, contributing to a fairer and more equal society. For Claire, this was a victory of truth, steadfastness, and a community relentlessly fighting for justice. After the storm of justice, Claire and Robert's life was no longer filled with gloom and tension. It became a journey of healing, rebuilding, and spreading hope, a living testament to the power of truth and justice. A few months after the hearing, Claire and Robert's wedding was held in a small garden outside Atlanta. Soft golden sunlight filtered through lush green trees, mingling with the cheerful laughter of family friends and the community that had stood by them throughout the ordeal. Claire wore a pristine white wedding dress, her eyes radiant with happiness. Robert stood beside her not only as the man she loved, but as an indispensable companion in the arduous fight for justice. Both families had overcome suspicions and prejudices to welcome their love. Warm embraces and sincere congratulations soothed many wounds in each heart. The surrounding community continued to send encouragement and support, from social media posts and gatherings to anti-racism campaigns. Life after the incident for Claire and Robert proved that truth, though temporarily concealed, can ultimately triumph. Justice, though slow, persistently moves forward, bringing peace to those deserving respect and protection. Their story of restored dignity is not unique. It joins countless others where the oppressed and wronged have stood up and reclaimed the light for their lives. From Oprah Winfrey, who overcame a difficult childhood to become a global inspiration, to Colin Kaepernick, who used his voice to challenge injustice in sports and society. These stories, like Claire and Robert's, share a common message: no one should be pushed to society's margins for being different, and the power of truth will always illuminate the darkness. And above all, this new life is an opportunity for them not only to live for themselves, but also to inspire others to keep moving forward to stand up for justice and human rights. Claire Washington's story is not an isolated incident, but a powerful wake-up call about the reality of racial discrimination and abuse of power within public institutions across the United States. Nationwide, millions have suffered similar experiences where skin color, background, or attire become grounds for suspicion, scrutiny, and even unlawful detention. Cases like Claire's, along with many others, have sparked strong public reactions, fueling deep debates on police and legal system reforms. In many states, new training programs have been designed to raise awareness about racial bias and to guide police on humane conduct and respect for human rights in all situations. Initiatives such as communication skills, training, nonviolent conflict resolution, and the use of monitoring technology to ensure police transparency are gradually becoming widespread. However, reform is not only about changing procedures or laws. It requires a profound cultural and mindset shift throughout the entire law enforcement system. Claire's story carries an important message: every individual has the right to be protected, respected, and to live in a fair society. And for that to become reality, change must begin with us, from raising awareness, speaking out against injustice, and actively participating in community activities. We cannot remain indifferent while heartbreaking stories like this continue to happen. Every small action, every sincere voice contributes to reshaping society. Remember, fairness does not come naturally. It must be protected and preserved through courage, perseverance, and solidarity. Claire's story is not just a reminder, but a call to action for all of us to build a future where everyone, regardless of skin color or circumstance, can live in justice and equality. Claire Washington's story has led us through a journey of pain, courage, and justice, from moments of public humiliation to an unrelenting fight for truth and human rights. It is not just the story of one individual, but a voice representing millions oppressed and suppressed by the racial discrimination that still exists in modern society. The greatest lesson Claire offers us is that true power does not lie in authority or violence, but in resilience, courage, and unwavering faith in justice. Have you ever asked yourself what you would do when faced with such injustice? Would you dare to speak up, to stand up, to protect yourself and others? Remember, every voice, every small action helps build a fairer society where no one is judged by skin color or background. And if you resonate with this story, don't just listen and forget. Subscribe, share the video, so Claire's story spreads, so the voice of justice echoes even further. Because your silence today may be your crime tomorrow. Don't let a woman like Claire stand alone against an entire system. We, you and I, all of us must stand up. Act now before justice becomes a luxury only for the lucky few.